Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Excel Email Manager Part 2. In this particular training, we're going to show you how to bring all of that email data and get it into our main application, as well as the ability to display attachments automatically in an attachments list and differentiate between the attachments that came from this email or any other emails. We're going to code that all up for you and show you every step of the way and every line of code. I can't wait, so let's get started. Alrighty, welcome back to part 2 of the Excel Email Manager. We've got a lot to cover in this episode. And just a refresher, if you have not seen part 1, you might want to head back there. I'll include the link below. Part 1, we focused primarily on the Outlook coding integration. And just for a review, let's go ahead and go through that now. We covered all of this code. This is within the Outlook VBA. We covered how to run the startup. We covered how to pull email information from incoming email within the inbox, and then how to add that email to the first available line, both in the email sheet of Excel here. And then, of course, if there were attachments, we would add those attachments within this table here. So that was all done within the code. We also discussed how to open and close workbooks as well. So we got that all covered. But in this training, part 2, what I want to do is I want to take this email information history here and I want to bring it over to the email manager. And the reason we have it on separate sheets is two-part, actually. The first reason is what I want to do is I'd like to select an email here, have the information show up here, and have all of these attachments show up here. And that's all the attachments for that specific email sender, not specific to a specific email. But I do want to highlight what's from the email and what's from past emails. So for example, if I have 10 attachments here, I would like to differentiate between those attachments that came with this email, perhaps based on the received on date, and those attachments that came from a different email. But I'd like all the attachments from that contact. We also discussed how to automatically take those attachments and bring them into our mail attachments folder so that we could create specific mail attachment folders automatically and dynamically based on the sender name and have those attachments in separate folders, and that was done automatically. We did all of that in part 1, so if you have not seen that, you will want to check it out. We've got so much to cover, I won't be able to go back and revisit that anymore. All right, so next up, what I want to do here is basically, I want to get all of the information. I want to pull in all of the emails and then bring them into the email manager. I want to be able to select on any specific email and have that information show up here. And I want all of those attachments to show up here. All right, also, so basically the idea is going to be here to copy this information here in one part and then paste it here. Paste those values. I also want to select a specific item here. So let's go ahead and go into the developers and then have that information show up here. And I'm going to delete this code. I have some code here, but let's go ahead and delete it because I want to type it out for you so you can watch them at all. All right, so it's all gone out except for option explicit. We'll put that in there. Okay, great. So we're going to start from scratch, and that's just the way I want it so that you can see every step. So let's go review again. Again, what I want to do is I want to highlight the selected row. I want to put the information, the email information, and those attachments here. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is we've got some conditional formatting. As you see, we have that in here already, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you how that was done. It's based on twofold. You'll notice that the rows, the alternate rows are highlighted in a very light blue, but only those rows with data. And that's a two-part conditional formatting using an AND formula. So let's take a look at that conditional formatting into the home, conditional formatting, manage rules. We're going to take a look at the blue. This is an and. That means there's two components, two requirements. One, it must be an even row. That means 16 18, 20. And the second part is it must have a value in column D. So those are the two requirements. Let's see how we code that in. And this is a common theme that I do. So if you've seen this before, sorry, but we'll just go over it one more time real quick because this is something I use very, very commonly. So we're going to use the and because there's two conditions. The first of which is mod of row 2. That means even rows. Only even rows get covered. The second of which is D16 does not equal blank. D16 does not equal. There's two components that are important when we're using this. The first component is that the row 16 is not absolute. It's relative, meaning there's no $sign in front of it. That's the first component in order to get it to be correct and accurate. The second component is that the applies to must start on row 16. Must start on row 16. So when we cancel that and we look at the applies to, we will see that the applies to is from D16 to J19. And of course, those can be absolute. So that's fine. That's the way that Excel is going to handle that anyways. So those two components, and that is how we get that. Now, if you wanted to, let's say we wanted to color the odd rows, how would we do that? Well, that's very easy. Let's go ahead and copy this, and then let's add a new rule, okay? And we'll go ahead and use a formula, and all we're going to do is make one change right here, 1. And then, of course, we're going to format that. Maybe we want to give it a fill color of, let's say, a light green's not going to look good. Perhaps maybe a darker blue, right? A little bit darker blue. Click OK, and then click OK again, and then of course we need to copy the applies to just as it is here on the other two. Paste that in and double check. Sometimes the row changes when you click the apply to, and then the formula may change. So recheck that. Sometimes it does. In this case, it did 16. So we need to keep an eye on this. Excel changes it for some reason or another. So now click apply, and now we see that we have automatically the odd rows. Now look at this. Now this one is colored in white. This is our selected row. So we want to make sure that the selected rows takes precedence. Moving that up and clicking apply will automatically. So remember, we want this rule on top. We want this dark blue as our selected row. We want that to take precedence. And now to get to this rule, let's take a look at the selected rule here. Edit the rule, and all this is again two conditions. We want D16. That means we want there to be a value in column D. 16 is relative for every row within the table. Second condition, row is equal to B2. B2 is where we're going to select it. So that means when we add our code, once we add our code, which we haven't yet, once we select a row here, the row is going to change to B2. B2 is going to change the row number as soon as we add that code on the selection change. So let's go ahead and add that now so you can see how that is done. We'll save our work into the developers mode. If you don't have the developers tab open, you can just click the options here under the customize ribbon and make sure that the developers is selected there. Another way to get there is Alt F11. That will get you there, and we'll go into, we're going to be writing code on the email manager. This is on sheet code that's ready. And now what do we want to do? Well, we want something to happen when we select a specific cell. Selection, not actually changing it, but we're actually selecting it. So we want code that's going to cover selection change. So when we look here, we're going to look for worksheet because there's action on the worksheet, and selection change has already been selected for us. We don't want every type of selection change for every single cell. We want it limited. And what do we want limited to? Well, we're going to start at a D16 and go all the way to J and then a low row. So that means if the user selects any cell within that range, then we want something to happen. All right, so we'll start out writing our code. If not intersect target, because that's the target, we use comma. Make sure it's a comma, not a period. I've seen some of you use periods before. Comma, range, starting at D16, and then over to J, and then we'll just go 9999. All right, well, that's a high row. End parentheses twice is nothing. Now, why do we have not and nothing? Well, that's Excel's rules, but once those two are canceled out, basically not and nothing get canceled out, and then it becomes if intersection, if the user intersects or selects within the range D 16 to J99, then something should happen. Well, there's another condition I want. If they select a blank row, I don't want anything to happen if they select a blank row. So how do we ensure that? Well, we put one other check, and because we want another condition, range D and what? What row? The target row. That's the row that the user has selected. Target row. Dot value does not equal empty. Does not equal empty. We want to make sure, so we only want something to happen, one, if they make a selection between D16 and J9999, and second condition, D and the target row must not be empty. Then what? Then I want to do two things. I want to put the row in B2, range, B2 dot value equals what? The target row. And the second one, which is something we have not written yet, we're gonna load the email. So we're gonna write the macro, but I'm gonna comment it out because otherwise it's gonna create a bug. I have not written the macro yet. When I do write the macro, I'm gonna call it email load. So that's the second thing I want to do. I want to load that email, and as soon as we write this macro, I'll uncomment that out. Okay, so that's really all the on-sheet code. So now when we select something, anything within that table, and it contains a value, then we are going to get that. So selecting without a value in D, we're going to get nothing. Selecting a cell in there, and we automatically get the highlighted row, and the B2 automatically changes to that selected row. Okay, we've got that. Now the other thing is I want to load the email information here. In fact, this is going to be empty. I want to load it. So let's write that macro and take this information and bring it up there. But first we're going to use some mapping. Basically what I want to do is I want to relate this column received on with this cell. I want to relate, we call that mapping, this column with this cell. So how do we do that? So basically, I want to relate a specific column with a specific cell. So this column received on is for, we'll just write it E2, right? You see that? E2 is right here. Received on E2. What is the from email? From email here is E3. So let's write that here. That's going to help us with mapping, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to see, okay, put this value, where do we want to put it? I know to put it in E2. Where do we put this? I know to put it in E3. So we're going to use mapping. And then, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to hide this by changing the font color. So it looks perfect. And, of course, we can lock those cells, too. The from name will be I3 for the from name. Email subject, that is going to be E4. Email message, that is going to be D5. And the category is going to be I2. And of course, the number of attachments we're not going to use. Now I want to loop. I want to go from here all the way to here. So how do we loop it? We can loop using the columns. Equals column. This is column 3, so that means this is column 4. So we're going to go starting at column 4, we're going to go all the way to here. This is column 10, so this is column 9. So we're going to start at 4 and go to 9. We're going to create a loop from 4 to 9 on row 13, and we're going to say, okay, whatever's in our selected row, whatever's in row 22, take whatever's in row 22 and whatever cell is in, whatever address is in D13, and put that value here. So we're going to use data mapping from 4 to 9, placing everything in this into their respective fields above, and we can do that with a very simple macro. So let's start writing that macro right now. Here in there, let's go into the email miscellaneous. There's nothing here, and we have option explicit, so we have that covered. Let's write an email called sub email load. Email load. That's the one we want to use. And the first thing we want to do is we want to dim the email row as long, and we're also going to need to loop through the column, so we need to dimension the email column as well. Dim email column as long. Okay, because we're going to loop, so we're going to need to use the dynamic rows and the columns both in this case. And then of course with sheet 1 we're going to primarily focus on sheet 1. So that's what we're going to do with sheet 1. Now what do we want to do? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to determine what the email row is. And we know the email row is in B2, right? Email row equals dot range B2 value. That's the selected row. Okay. Email row. So we know that. Now we're going to loop through the columns. For email column equals 429. Remember, we just went over that. Next email column. That closes our loop. But what do we want to do inside the loop? Dot range. Okay, what is this? What is the range that we want to equal? The range is going to be dynamic. The range is going to be E2, E3, E4, E5. So where is that range? Well, the range is on row 13 and whatever column, column 4, column 5, column 6, column 7, 8, 9, right? So the column's going to change, the row won't change. So that's what we need to pull up. I need to pull this. So the first particular range is going to be dot cells. We're using dot cells because both the row and the column are dynamic. So the row, of course, is going to be 13. That's not going to change, 13. But the email column will change. Email column dot value. Now, what is this value? This is the range, E2, I2, right? Those are all the ranges that we just typed in there. That's the range, and dot value of that equals, what does it equal? Well, it's going to equal, we're going to use dot cells again, dot cells. And now in this time, the row is going to be whatever our email row is. In this case, let's pull it up. In this case, our email row is 22, right? Our email row is 22. So it's going to take 22 and it's going to loop through this one, then this one, then this, all the way to the end. And it's going to place these items in their respective places above using this mapping. So the mapping really helps us eliminate a lot of lines of code. So the email row, we know that the column index again is going to be dynamic email column dot value. Right, so that's it. That's how we email fields. They're all dynamic. So that's our row. That's all we have to do. And that is going to load our data. That's all we have to do. And it might be a little bit slow, but let's check it out here so we can see. And we can also make it faster. Now let's take a look and see how that works. All we have to do is select it and uncomment. Let's go ahead and uncomment this, because now we have our macro ready, so we can uncomment that. Okay, so now we have it. There we go. So now you see all the email loads up, just like we have. Some of them have a lot to do with, dynamic, but others are not. So it's a great way to display the email. All right, so now we have it, but I want to get all of the attachments from that in here. And how do we do that? So basically what I want to do is this. I want to look through all of our attachments. I want to determine the sender email, and I want to put that here. I want to put that right here. And based on the sender email, I want to get the result of that. I'm not going to use the received on in this case, because I want all the information. So just the sender email, not the received on date, because I want all of the attachments based on that attachment. Now, if you want to only display the attachments for this specific email, then you will use both criteria. You will use both. You will use the sender email and the received on. In that case, it's only going to pull the attachments that came with a specific email. But if you want to see all the attachments, then just leave this blank. So let's pull in, we're going to use an advanced filter to do that. So let's go ahead and write the macro so that we can do that. We're going to call that email load attachments. So back in our email here, we're going to create a new macro. We're going to call it sub email load attach. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dimension the last attachment row, last attach row as long, because I need to run an advanced filter on those. And to do that, I need to know the last row of those emails. Next up, we also want to dimension the last result row as long too. Last result row as long. What is the last result row? Well, that is the row right here. These are our results. So I need to know the last row, because I'm going to be pulling this information and bringing it, and I'm going to be putting it right here. So I need to know what the last row is so that I can get that information in there. All right, so let's continue on with our macro. Now that we've dimensioned both of those, we're going to focus on sheet 1. So let's write the macro with sheet 1. And I want to clear the first thing I want to do is I want to clear any old attachments just to make sure. So dot range, part of sheet 1, L4 through O, and then we'll just go for high row 999, and then dot clear contents. And what this is going to do is clear out any old attachments. Okay, so we want that clear. To bring in the new ones, we want to make sure that starting from L4 all the way to O. Why are we using O? O is going to be where our file name is. It's going to be hidden. In fact, let me change that. We're going to show it now. Make sure the font. Okay, so that's clear, but eventually we're going to hide that. We want the long file name. We're going to use that because I think in the next episode we're going to write some code so we can open up this, or we can display, maybe it would be nice to display a little thumbnail of a picture or PDF or something right here, just as we did in the file manager. Wouldn't that be nice if we selected an attachment and we're able to see that attachment right here, just like an Outlook? So I think we can do that. Maybe we're going to get to that in part 3. If you guys want, put the comments below. Let me know. Before I forget, I wanted to make sure that to remind you of the amazing dashboard course. I've had so much amazing feedback on the dashboard course that I'm just blown away. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And if you haven't gotten a chance to enroll in the dashboard, March our prices are going to be going up. So make sure you get in the February. So I'd hate to have to pay more for that if it's unnecessary. So just wanted to let you know on that. Continuing on now on our load attachments macro, then now we've cleared out. Now what we want to do is we also want to clear out any old criteria on the attachment sheets. So on the attachment sheet, any criteria here and any results here should all be cleared out. So we're going to write just one line of code to clear all that out, starting in M3 and all the way to T in the last row. So we can do that right here. So we're going to focus on sheet 3 here. That's the attached sheet 3, range M3 and then through T999. We're going to clear that out, dot clear contents. So we clear old results, criteria, and results. And results. Okay, so we've cleared that out because that's important. When you run your advanced filter, we want to get that. We also want to put in the from email, and you may or may not want to put the received on. That's kind of up to you, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So the first thing we're going to do, sheet 3 dot range, and then of course M3 dot value equals dot range. That's sheet 1 right now. We're dot equals what? E3. Why E3? That's the from email. From email. Now I'm going to comment this out, but you may want to add it in. So this next line, sheet 3, this is criteria dot range. What is this? N3, that's going to be for the email. N3 dot value equals. Now, I guess we'll uncomment it and show you what it's like, but that's kind of up to you. So dot range E2. E2, what is an E2? That is the received on date. So we have two choices, right? It's up to you. It's a personal choice. Received on, I guess we could make that an option. So we have two choices. Right now it's commented out. When we select an email and we want to show the attachments, do we want to show only the attachments that came with the email, or do we want to show all attachments by that person? So that's up to you. I want to show all the attachments regardless of when they sent it. So we'll do that. And then what I want to do is I want to highlight just the attachments. In other words, just the attachments that came with the email. But it's nice to know, it's nice to have all the attachments by a sender. So that's why I'm going to comment this out. That's why, as long as we don't put in the received on, we're going to get attachments from all of this particular sender, not based on date. So that's why it's commented out. But I put it in there just in case you want to add it in, so that way you have the ability if you do want to see it. You could also add this to an option I guess we could do that in part 3, right? We could add an option somewhere up here that says only by all. We could put in all dates or specific dates, right? So that way the option up here would change based on that. So we could show it. So we could do a front end option, which kind of might be nice as well, as I'm just thinking of things and options. All right, moving on. Now what we want to do is we're ready to do our advanced filter right after we get the last row. So we want to get the last row. I need to know this last row. In this case, it's 10. But then what I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter starting on A2 all the way to F in the last row, running an advanced filter. We're going to copy that information, and we are going to use criteria from M2 through N3. And this is going to be cleared out, even though we're not going to use it. M2 through N3, and the results are going to go over in Q2 through T2. Make sure the headers are the same. We always want to make sure the headers are the same, and the results are going to appear down here. Then once we have the results, we're going to determine the last row of the results. As long as that row is greater than 2, we can then take our results and bring them over and put them right here. All right, so continuing on with our code, let's go ahead and write that. The last row, so we have the last attached row equals sheet 3 dot range A, right? That's our column 999 dot end XL up dot row. All right, so that is going to get us our last attachment row. We may want to add another 9 here because we can get a lot of attachments. All right, so that covers it. Now we have our last. Now we are ready to run our advanced filter. Let's do that. We're going to start out with sheet 3 range, starting with the header A2. Of course, we want to start at the header, and of course, F is the last column. F and the last attach row. Dot advanced filter and XL copy. We're copying this information to a new area in our worksheet, comma, criteria range colon equals sheet 3. Remember, we need to define sheet 3 each time because we've got on with sheet 1 here. So we always needed to specify sheet 3 in this case. Sheet 3 range, including the headers on the criteria, M2 through N3. M2 through N3. That's going to cover both of our fields, but of course our date's going to be blank in this case, which is fine, comma, and then what we're going to do is we're going to copy to that range, copy to range colon equals, again, sheet 3 dot range. What is the range? In this case, it is Q2 through T2, Q2 through T2, comma, and then unique, because we want unique value, unique equals true. Okay, so now we've got our advanced filter. Let's just double check. The last thing I want to double check is that Q2 through T2. That is where we're going to make sure that we want those results. Q2 through T2. That's correct. That's where we want our results to go. All right, now that we've run our advanced filter code, we need to check the results. When we find the last results row, we've dimensioned the last result row above, so we can now define that here. Results row, result actually, equals sheet 3 dot range, and we can use Q 999 dot end XL up dot row. That's going to define it. Now we need to put a check in. If the last results row is less than 3, then skip it. If last result row is less than 3, then what? Then go to no attach. That means we're going to skip the copying over. So down here, we're going to put no attach. All right. And up here, we're going to write the copying information over. And in this case, we are going to send it over. Now we are ready to run it over. Sheet 1 dot range L4, that's the first row, L4 of our attachments, colon, O, and the last result row plus 1. Why are we adding 1? Why are we adding 1? Well, let's take a look. I'll show you why. Our first results is in row 3 here. Our first row here is in row 4. So we need to add 1 because they start in different rows. So we want to make sure to add 1. So the sheet range last result dot value equals sheet 3 dot range Q3 through T and what? Q3T and the last result row dot value. Okay, that's going to copy over our attachments. Okay, now we've copied them over. Great. All right, so let's take a look at that. Now, all we want to do is we want to add this macro right here, copy that, and we're going to add it to our load. So right at the end here, there. So that way, when we load it, our attachments are going to load. Let's see how that works and see if we have any errors. All right, let's pick something with attachments. These have attachments, so we'll click here, and it has 1. There we go. Now our invoice, they only have 1 attachment. So this one's got 2. So you'll see there's 2 different dates, right? There's 2 specific invoices, and yet there's 2 different dates. We have one on 117 and one on 817. This way, regardless of the date, and you can see the entire email. Here, if we double click on it, we can see the entire email. HTML emails, we may want to, in the future, what would be nice is if I parse this data to remove everything between like the HTML code. That would be a nice feature on this because we really don't need the HTML code. It would be really nice to eliminate that. I'll think about that. Let me know what your thoughts on that because it's kind of hard to read when you get beyond all this HTML. Of course, emails that don't have HTML are much easier to read, like this one doesn't have HTML, so it's much easier to read. But those with HTML code are not as easy. So keep that in mind. So again, once we've selected like this, this email has 1 attachment. However, remember, we're listing all the attachments based on this sender so that we can easily see all of those attachments. All right, that is working really, really well. Let's continue with our code. Now also, we've got, remember, I just copied in this information. I copied that from here, but I want a macro to run that. I want to actually take a macro and I want to put a refresh, or at least create a macro that brings in this data on this table here because I just manually did it. So if we delete this data, now I want a macro to do it. So let's create that macro and we'll call it email refresh. So basically it's going to bring this data into here. And if we have a lot of data, we'll use copy and paste value to value, which I use often. It doesn't work great for large amounts of data, and this list is going to get large, so we'll use copy and paste, which is a little bit quicker. In some cases, a lot quicker, depending upon the type of data. All right, so let's write, we'll call it email refresh, or email refresh. So we'll start, I'll write it up here since we have sub email refresh. And that's going to be a new sub. And with this one, what we want to do is I want to determine the last email row, bring the information over and copy it over. So we are going to dimension the last email row as long. I need to know the last row of sheet 2, range A. So let's get that last row. The first thing we want to do is with sheet 1 and clear out any emails that may be in sheet 1. So we can start out dot range D16 through J99999, and then we're going to clear those contents out. So we're going to clear that. Dot clear contents. Not comments, contents. Okay, so we've cleared all that out. Now we need to get the last email row from sheet 2. Last email row equals sheet 2, column A, range A, and then we'll do 99. That's the first column. So we can pull that up. Dot end, and then XL up, just as we always do. And that's going to pull up our last row. So once we have that last row, now we can just simply copy and paste. We're using copy and paste in this case through testing. Value to value is slow. Remember here, when we're copying over, we used value to value here, and it works great, right? Because it's not that much data. But I've noticed that when we do value to value on emails, it was a lot slower. So we'll copy and paste. In my test was a lot faster because just the sheer amount of text was very, very slow. That's how it worked out. So we'll just copy and paste. And then we'll make it quicker using stop the calculations and stop the screen updating. So we're going to write a line here. Now we can say sheet 2. We're going to copy the information. That's the emails. Range. What are we copying? A3, starting with the data. We don't need the header. A3 through G, and the last email row, dot copy. So we're going to copy that. And what are we going to do? We're going to paste it right into the email. We're just going to paste the values because we don't want to mess up the formats. So into sheet 1 dot range D16 through J dot paste special, and then paste values. Paste. You can scroll down forward down here to paste values. You can find it here or continue typing it in, either one. Okay, so paste values. Now also when we paste that in, I'm going to write the code and then I'm going to comment it out so you see why we do it. We also want to wrap text false. So this same, I forgot the last row here, and the last email row, we'll do +1 because this starts on a different row. So we want to make sure that we plus 13, plus 13. Why? Again, because this starts on row 3, this starts on row 16, so we need to add 13. So we're going to paste those values in there. Also, what we want to do is we want to wrap the text. Again, if we don't wrap the text, you're going to see this all amount of data, this row width is going to create very, very high because of the text. So we always want to wrap the text. So that's an important step so that all of our rows stay with the same height. So the height of those rows must stay the same. So we can do that with just using this same range, but then we're going to wrap text equals false. We do not want to wrap text equals false. And that line of code will make sure that all of our row height stays uniform and generally at about 15. So that's it. And now we're ready. We're done with the sheet 1. And then we also want to cancel out of the cut, copy and paste. Application dot cut copy mode equals false. Since we use that, we don't need that anymore. And then we're also going to add in some reset calculations, but let's take a look at that and run that. I'm going to bring it over, and then I'm going to run it. All right, it was actually pretty fast. And it ran automatically, so that's good. And I selected the first row. It was relatively fast. But let me add something in there. When your email gets a lot, it could be slower. So we have these code resets. You've seen me use this before. We want to cancel out of the enable events, calculations, and screen updating. So we're going to write stop calculation. I'm going to copy that because as your email list grows, it would become a little bit slower. And all I just need to do is paste that there, stop, and then reset calc. And I would put that in lowercase so when I click, it becomes uppercase and I know my macros right. All right, let's bring this over here. All right, so now let's bring this over here a little bit. Indent it so it looks nice. Okay, so we've got the refresh, and we may want to add a button here, but I think I'm going to do it automatically. When an email comes in, it would be nice, but it depends on how slow. So let me at least add a button there so that we can refresh it. I've got a button here. I'll just use this. Control C and then Control V. Now I just got to figure out where to put this button here. We'll put it right here for now, but let's make it zoom in a little bit so we can, and then we'll bring it here, refresh. I'm going to use that browse button. We're going to program that and add that macro in just a second. Okay, we've got the refresh, and we'll bring it over and write justified so that we have a place for an icon. And then we'll insert an icon. Let's find an icon, picture, and I've got one in my images file. So we can add that to that. So let's pull up images and then refresh. Okay, this one looks good. Refresh. All right, so we've got a refresh, and that's just a tiny bit big. 0.21. Okay, that's still a little bit big. And you can't see it, it's blue on blue. Let's change the color of that. All right, we can go into color and we can make it green here. That's a bit better, or maybe a little bit lighter. So we can change the colors of the icons, don't forget, with that as well. We can make it lighter. All right, I like that. It's not great, but it'll do for our purposes. Make it a little bit smaller. And now what we'll do is we'll group those together and we'll assign a macro. All right, control, holding the control, select them both. Format, we'll do a format. I've got a shortcut here. Group it, right click, assign macro. Oh, we haven't created, we did create the macro. Right click, assign macro, and then we have refresh, email refresh right here. Click OK. All right, now we've assigned it to a macro, and now we have everything. And now we just click the button and it refreshes automatically. All right, moving on. Now what I want to do is I want to know which one of these emails came, which one of these attachments came from this email. And we can use conditional formatting for that. So let's highlight the entire table. Let's just go down a little bit so we know. And I'm going to add a conditional formatting. Home, conditional formatting, new rule. And we're going to use a rule like this. We're going to say equals, what do we want to equals? Received on N4, and this is going to be not absolute because we're going to use it for every column, so we're going to clear that out. Okay, N4, clear that out. N4, remember, we want this for every row, equals, what is it going to equal? This received on here, and this should be absolute. It's going to be E2 every time. And what do I want to do? I want to format that. I want to give that a little bit of a darker color here, perhaps maybe a little bit darker like this one. And then I'm going to give it a bold font so that those attachments stand out. Those are the attachments for this specific email. And then click apply, making sure that N4 starts on the same thing as L4. That's important. All right, now click OK, and now we see that the specific attachment that came with that email is highlighted. So if we click on other particular ones with attachments, we'll see also that is, let's take one look at one where a lot came in. Okay, we have this one. There we go. So we see this email on 217. We see highlighted exactly which attachment came from which email. All right, excellent. So we've got that covered. Now I want to browse further. If you remember, we need the attachments folder in this area here. So let's write code that we can browse for that folder. So back into the VBA we go. And we can see here, back in our email, let's write code for browsing that file. We know that the specific folder must go into P3. So let's put that in there. Make sure that it goes into P3, into our email, and we'll create a new macro. And this time we will call the macro browse main attachment folder. Sub browse main, that's a long name, attachment folder. Okay, and all we need to do is say with, we're going to create a dialog box. So with application, file dialog, we want to file dialog, and then we want MSO file dialog folder picker, because we want a specific folder. We don't want a file, we just want the folder. And then we're going to give it a title. What title do we want that? Let's call it select equals select a main attachment folder. Now we've got that, and then we're going to say if, just in case they don't click, if dot show does not equal -1. What this is going to do is let us know that there is no selection, just so there's no error. Does not equal -1. -1 is for the selection. Then go to, call it no selection. In that case, we're going to put a no selection right down here. No selection with a colon. All right, but assuming that there is, we're going to put whatever we want to do right here. Sheet1.range. What is that range? P3. P3 dot value equals, what is it equal to? Selected item. Dot selected items, just the one. And that's it. That's all we have to do. It's very, very simple. Now all we need to do is assign the macro to that button. We can tab this out a little bit. Here is it. We can copy this, go back into Excel, right click, assign the macro, paste that in. Of course, we only have a few macros, so it's easy. There. Now when we select it, we get the browse and we can see, and of course my attachments located on my desktop here, where I have my mail attachments main folder. Now we've set the main folder, and of course we don't really want to see these file extensions. So of course changing the font, home, going back into the font, changing the font to the same as the background color hides that. So now we hit our long file names. And I think a good idea would be to be able to select these and have the picture display here. That would be excellent for our next training. I think there's a few more ideas I've got, but what I really want to do is I want to hear your ideas. I'd like to know what more would you like me to add to this? It's not going to be a very long training. In other words, maybe 3 parts is all we'll do. Those long parts are a little bit too long, but maybe 3 parts is good because this is going to be a powerful application. We haven't done much with categories. In other words, we have the ability to add a category, but I think I want the ability to change it. We should not have the ability to change anything in the email. Emails, you don't want to change the data, but a category we can. So maybe a drop-down list with a category and the ability to change it. In other words, when it's changed here, it's also changed down here, and it's also, more importantly, changed within our email address, within our email history here. So I think we're going to add that in part 3, the ability to change the category. And then maybe a default list of categories we'll check. And then another reason we have that row here is because I'm probably going to bring that row in and put it here hidden. So let's say we change the category. If we change this, we know what row in the main table to replace it. That's why we added the row, so we know what row we can change the category. We already know what column in the main database. The column's always going to be F, but we don't know what row. But if we copy and paste, I didn't do it yet, but if I include this row, include it here, and hide it, then we always know. So that's a nice little trick, and I'll probably show you that next time. But now we have the ability to display emails, which is going to be a great way. We have the ability to display attachments when we do have attachments. Here we go. This one's got a lot of attachments. We have the ability to display attachments here, and we have the ability to highlight the specific attachments for that email. In fact, let's go ahead and put in this one. This one's got 2, so we know which attachment went with this specific email. All right, we may focus on removing HTML code if you want it, but it's part of the original email, so I'm not sure if you want that removed or not, but we can go ahead and do that if that's an idea you'd like to have. Let me know in your comments. I always appreciate your comments, your likes, your continued following, and please subscribe if you have not already. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, if you do get a chance, you would love the single-click dashboard course. Let me go ahead and show you that real quick. It's an amazing course if you have not seen it yet. It's called the Advanced Dashboard Reports Masterclass, where I'm going to teach you a ton of things, included automatic filtering, where we'll be able to just simply type in a partial match or an exact match and easily filter down results. I will also teach you how to click a sales by month, where you can click data or graphs or charts in just a single click. Also, profit and loss. We got a profit and loss training where you have the ability to drill down data, which is going to be a great training. So to be able to drill down data and drill up is super amazing. Also, in this course, you're going to learn how to create dynamic data within a pop-up. So for example, if you want to know all of the invoices are outstanding for a specific client, we have dynamic data in a pop-up picture, something that's never been taught before. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. For example, this particular customer has just 1 invoice overdue, so the picture, the size of the picture becomes dynamic along with the data in it. And of course, we have the ability to save reports as Excel, PDF, picture, custom reports, and PDF attached, as well as email those. So I hope you get a chance. We also have custom reports and toggling columns. It's an amazing dashboard, and the students really love it. So if you do get a chance, I would love for you to join and have you in the masterclass. All right, thanks so much for joining me. Until next week, have a great day.